the U.S. has been trying to force the Iraqi people to accepting a number of things. The major issues that the U.S. government has been trying to push the Iraqis to accept it is a long-term intervention in Iraq, mostly a military intervention, having permanent bases in Iraq, using Iraq as a U.S. military base, and other types of intervention. And the oil issue. I don't think that the majority of Iraqis will accept these things. I mean, the last few years were a good example. In fact, today is the anniversary of the fall of Baghdad, and just look at how did Iraq look today after 5 years of the fall of Baghdad? Demonstrations in all around the country, lack of services, destruction and death, because Iraqis refused to accept the plan of keeping foreigners in Iraq, and because Iraqis refused to accept the plan of privatizing their country's oil. So these things actually, like, they are generations worth of education and collective consciousness about how people view their country, how people understand their country. It doesn't have anything to do with Saddam or the Ba'ath regime or whatever. It's about Iraqis being Iraqis, you know, and understanding that this is our oil and we are not ready to privatize it. So I mean, even if they manage to bribe or kill or buy the parliament and pass an oil law, that wouldn't mean that the Iraqi people will accept these things. I have doubts that they will actually manage to pass it through the parliament, because it seems that the parliament has resisted through the worst part of it, through all of the visits of Cheney and Gates and all of the bombings and intimidations and bribes. They even tried to bribe them, and it didn't work. So I don't think it will actually pass. It seems like the administration realized that that chapter has failed. That's why they started signing now some other agreements, technical service agreements are agreements that keeps Iraq's oil owned by the Iraqis, and they are short term, and Iraq just pays flat rate payment. And this is what the Iraqi parliament actually wanted to start with, to continue with just having TSAs rather than PSAs, production sharing agreements. So I think now they are signing PSAs with a number of American and international companies. I think I don't think it will pass in the near future. And if it passed, it will be another reason to increase violence in Iraq, because that's a very important problem. Is that Iraqis are against the occupation, against partitioning, against privatizing oil. If they can achieve this through passing resolutions in the parliament, they will pass resolutions. If the US government reacted and freaked out every time 1 million Iraqis demonstrated in the streets, I assure you that more Iraqis will demonstrate and write letters to the Congress and letters to the Washington Post. But when the US only reacts to violence and ignores all of the Iraqi effort for non-violent resistance, whether this non-violent resistance is through demonstrations or petitions or parliamentarian resolutions and these things, when the US ignores these things, it pushes people to choose violence as an option. So it's a two-way dialogue, you know. If we wanted actually to reduce violence in Iraq, it's not just about Iraqis who are putting car bombs or attacking US troops. It's about the US government that is killing other ways of expressing Iraqis' resistance to the occupation, and then creating this one venue that is a very huge strategic mistake. So if the oil law was forced, I think it will be yet another strategic mistake that will push Iraq more towards more violence and more clashes.
Thank you.
Paul?
Yes, I hear about from you about the depleted uranium and the major problems over there. I want to know, how did you find out about it, and how about the other two of you? Did you know about it? We don't seem to hear about it on Fox television, nor even any other television or newspaper here.
Well, the first time I heard about depleted uranium was in the military. I think it was right after what we were told to do if we were hit by an atom bomb, which was turn around and go the other way. Right. So what we were told about depleted uranium was we saw an old video that was from the first Gulf War that said, you know, they broke down that it was a leftover isotope from, or not isotope, but leftover parts of uranium when it's sort of broke down. It's sort of like toxic waste. Well, it is toxic waste, and it's, so I first heard about it from the military, and they told, like, just wipe it off if you are come up across, like, some old artillery shells, anything like that. Don't touch it, don't go near it. But what they didn't tell us was how it really works, which, you know, it breaks apart and it stays within the soil for 4.5 billion years. Now, an important thing to realize about this is it doesn't just stay in the soil in Iraq. It, you know, there's these things called, you know, trade winds, right? Which basically, and same thing with the ocean. The wind and water move all across the earth, right? And, you know, you can find sand from parts of the Middle East, like, you know, in Europe. So this is something that's very, very, very important to remember, that this environmental hazard is not just affecting the Middle East, it's affecting, you know, all of us in some way or another. Even here in the States, in Oklahoma back in the early 80s, there was this weapons company that disposed of depleted uranium through deep well injections, calling it experimental fertilizer. Okay, so this is the same kind of things that are still happening. There's this other thing called bovine growth hormone, which is the cause of mad cow disease, which I always heard was a mutated form of anthrax. Well, you know, so, and meanwhile they're shoving anthrax vaccines down our throats. Now, the military's always experimented on soldiers since the atomic veterans, and there's no reason to think that it's stopped now. You know, it's sort of like, here we go again to the military-industrial complex. Like, we make weapons to sell weapons to ourselves, and what do we use to make weapons? There are these pharmaceuticals, there are these, which depleted uranium, it's a chemical, I would almost consider it a pharmaceutical. I think personally that depleted uranium is going to be the Agent Orange of our generation, of the Iraq War. Right now, the VA denies testing to most people who request it. That's another thing that we're going to try to take on, but it's also a very, like, mentally taxing thing to think about, that our country did indeed like put us in dangerous situations, expose us to these disgusting chemicals that we are not making any kind of effort to clean up right now. So those are my feelings on depleted uranium. As of right now, I've had a couple people in Chicago like want to get involved with the media and then realize that it's not a good idea, because there was this editor, the editor of USA Today, tried to do a story on it, but he was asked to stop by the Pentagon and then removed from his job. So this was back in like 2000. I'm not too sure about that, I'm sorry. But so that's the kind of things that surround depleted uranium.